Hello everyone, this is Andrew Knight here at RICS. I lead our data and tech thought leadership around the implications of data and tech right across the built environment, and also our tech partner program. I'm very happy to have Dominic Jackson from Blocks Online, one of our tech partners, with me today to discuss his firm, what they do in terms of the built environment, and really over to Dominic to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your firm and the backstory for you and your colleagues.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and yeah, great to be part of this session and discussion with you in relation to what's happening, topics of interest around the built environment, the property market. So yeah, just a bit of background about myself and Blocks Online. I'm actually the Managing Director of Blocks Online. We are a provider of cloud-based block management software, and it's to support the residential managing agents, property management companies, and we've fashioned it around a built-in best practice workflow really to make block management easier, hence the strap line. The original company itself, or the genesis of the company, started in 2008 when the founder of the business, Blocks Online, was actually involved in setting up a managing agent business with his partner. And at the time, they looked around to see what sort of software is available to support their business, and they didn't really find anything that fitted the bill. They were looking for something that enabled them to offer a kind of a transparent, open approach to dealing with their clients, and also we're looking at the cloud-based environment that was back in 2008 was starting to become of interest, and just making it easier to work anywhere, anytime, as long as you've got an internet connection. So the software was developed originally on the back of that business, and in 2013 they realized that actually they'd developed some software that had worked well for their business, and felt it could be of interest to other managing agents and property management companies. Hence, Blocks Online was spun out as a standalone business in 2013. The company, in terms of the first 5 years, sort of from 2013 to 2018, was really about helping to build out and develop the software further, so it became more of a holistic sort of, well, as we describe it, sort of comprehensive, fully integrated suite of software. And then from 2018, after getting on board a few clients, sort of in the double digits, sort of up to about 20, I came on board at the beginning of 2018, really to help start scaling the business. And really, we've been on that journey for the last 3 years. We've now quadrupled our turnover. We've gone from 20 odd clients up to over 140, and our clients look after about, well, just over 5,000 blocks and just over 80,000 units. So pretty substantial portfolio. We tend to focus on the SME marketplace rather than enterprise level, and our value proposition really reflects that. As you can see, we are RICS Tech Partner, and we're also an ARMA partner as well. And we've won a couple of awards for our software as well. So I guess the fact that we've actually been able to grow and get recognized for it as well, and align ourselves with the industry thought leaders and standards like RICS and ARMA, that's obviously stood us in pretty good stead. Just like to quickly show you, I guess we structured the business as sort of 4 core elements from what the software does. It's pretty much, as I said, a sort of a comprehensive solution where all of the day-to-day financial activities associated with block management, creating budgets, issuing demands, recording receipts, liaising with clients, reporting, that's sort of in the core module. We have a property portal, which we're going to talk a bit more about later on in the discussion, I think, in relation to the golden thread, which enables stakeholders like leaseholders, freeholders, etc., to see information specifically relating to either their unit, their flat, or their block, or their estate, and enables a two-way communication with the agent as well. And that's integrated into the ticketing management module, which enables the agent and the property managers to manage their day-to-day workflow effectively and focus on the things that they need their attention. And finally, there's a credit control module, which typically is used by the larger agents for managing debtors and optimizing optimizing for cash flow. So that's sort of what we do. In terms of size now, we're up to 8 people. We have a sales and marketing side. We have a support team available 9 to 5:30 Monday to Friday, backed up by a very good online knowledge base. And then we have some developers, a team of developers as well, that help to move our product forward and develop our software, because software really, it's an ongoing journey to improve functionality, etc. So yeah, that's us really.
That's great. Thanks, Dominic. Well, you mentioned the golden thread, and I guess rather sadly, we've marked yet another anniversary for those of you who are watching from the UK of Grenfell Tower. And clearly from that, if any good has come from that instance, obviously this development of this concept of the golden thread. But I'm really keen to hear, because it obviously means to some extent different things to different people. From your perspective, Dominic, what does the golden thread mean for you and stakeholders in property management?
Well, I guess, as you said, sadly, we've just passed the 4-year anniversary of Grenfell, and I think, putting in context what happened there, and clearly the tragedy that ensued as a result of that. There was the Dame Judith Hacker obviously carried out an independent review into that, and produced, some people may be familiar with it already, but produced a report that was actually the full publication came out in May 2018. And as part of that, she called for the golden thread of information, which really is around creating a trail of communication data that is accessible by anyone that needs to have that of interest, whether they're affected by it directly or maybe indirectly. And I think we'll talk about some of the stakeholders involved. But taking that report on, obviously work is going on now in terms of a new draft building safety bill, which again we may talk about as well, which is due to be sort of coming into law in 2022. But in August 2020, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, MHLCG, they had a working group which ended up defining what the golden thread is. And there, I think in May 2021, there's now I've got it written down, there's an official definition, which is the golden thread is the information that allows you to understand a building and the steps needed to keep both the building and people safe now and in the future. So yeah, I mean, I kind of summarized it really about, it's basically about getting the right safety information at the right time to the right people and in the right form. So that's really where I guess a lot of minds are being focused now in the industry to sort of bring that to fruition.
So I mean, as you've said, the right people. We obviously use that sort of slightly over-engineered word, stakeholder, these days. But who are what are those groups of people who either will be producing or consuming or a bit of both or sharing data? Because obviously there's a lot of actors in property management. What does that landscape look like from your perspective?
Yes, well, I guess. Where it directly affects, I mean, the sort of day-to-day people that typically will interact with us are our communities that are really around the managing agents. So you have the freeholders and the management companies therein, which the agents typically will obviously be dealing with them. They may be dealing with directors of the management company to basically be appointed to manage the building services and everything from looking after collecting service charge contributions from leaseholders to contribute to obviously for repair and maintenance aspects of communal areas, that'll be involved in setting budgets. The people in the managing agent business, the property manager is probably the most well-known sort of title, and actually in our system with our software, they're very much the kind of linchpin for communication and flow of data between the different parties, whether that be the freeholder, the leaseholder, or suppliers. And suppliers can range from gardeners through to lift maintenance to building construction, accountants, in terms of doing these sort of financial accounts. So that I suppose those stakeholders that are kind of that we see affected day to day by this is in that sort of universe. But I think when you look at the wider context of what's involved, clearly the fire service, the police, architects, builders, constructors, local government planners, there's another raft of stakeholders that are going to be involved in this golden thread. And from our perspective, having that data available to be able to be shared with the right audience is really what, software is. It's an enabler, it's a tool to make things easier. So that's really how we've kind of looked to design it.
Now, but one thing that struck me when I read the recent published document was it was slightly, and apologies for implying this to the authors of that document, but it was quite vague about actually what the data is, and also slightly implying that there would be future work around some kind of standardization about what this data is. Do you have a sense of, because we can talk about data, but this is arguably a really good example where the devil will be in the detail, where actually what data are we talking about in terms of either retrofits or materials used, the kind of work done, whether that's been signed off by various participants, architects, builders, people even going in and doing reasonably sort of regular maintenance work that, once again, if not done properly, could have a negative impact. Do you have a sense yet of what that data set looks like?
I guess given what currently exists in relation to the data that's shared and utilised by the different parties, I mean, we're fairly, I'd say the business itself, in terms of the data activities, there are certain things that have happened for many years. I mean decades effectively. So as far as things like Section 20 notices to carry out works, there's legislation that requires this data to be presented, signed off, audited, and kept and tracked. So our software, enables that. And I guess crucially, sort of looking at the building safety aspect. All the sort of areas that are going to start to come out, I guess, around fire safety order requirements, health and safety, fire and emergency reference areas that residents can look at documentation. We've got a lot of that already sort of built into our software to assist from a workflow perspective. So I get a sense that it will be quite, dare I say it, easy to add on different sort of folders, if you will, of data that needs to be updated, maintained, audited, and accessible. So I think that sort of approach to the other, what I would call outside of the more mundane sort of repair and maintenance type issues, those more heightened issues around sort of health and safety, fire and safety, that data will be easy to capture and share.
And one thing that always interests me from a lot of the work we've done around kind of data standardization at RICS is the fact that the built environment still seems to rely on, although one might call it digital, effectively just digital copies of documents. Is a lot of this information still flowing around effectively as a PDF of a document, rather than something that enables a bit more structured analytics, or looking up a particular data item where you're having to almost still read through a PDF of a document to find the actual data item?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the challenges, actually, is that the type of documentation and the data sets that are going to be required and the ease of use. I mean, in very simple terms, a lot of the data captured is, as you described, in PDFs, Word documents. We have things like Excel and CSV files for the financial side of things. So that's kind of common fare, if you like. Now, I guess the challenge is going to be as to how well, what sort of structure do you put in place to enable different parties to, let's say, co-author or add comments and have it as a living, breathing document? A bit like, dare I say, if you use Google, for example, you can sort of have a Google Sheet, and you can make amendments, and it will update that with everyone's sort of comments. I think there will be a need for that as people move forward, so that people understand where you are with versioning control, and obviously there'll be some, I guess, some restrictions on who does what, because obviously, as the legislation comes down and you have things like building safety manager appointed, who is, kind of the go-to person that has to sort of manage this on behalf of the accountable person, which is going to be, let's say the board of directors of the property management company. There will be, and this is, I think, part of what will happen over the next year as sort of people are working through this process, refining it to make it just easy to access, easy to interact with, but not onerous, not putting barriers up. Because I think one of the things, in terms of why this thing may flounder or be a struggle is that people just make it too complex to deal with the data.
Indeed, and apologies about getting down into the weeds slightly, but obviously within the UK, or England and Wales and Scotland, we do have this concept of a unique property reference number. Do you use that in your system to try and help, maybe when you're interfacing with other data feeds sometimes, to say, well, actually, let's be really sure that we're talking about the right property here in terms of both individual units and the block as a whole? Have you used that kind of data point to help perhaps get data in from different systems, and when you're communicating with other stakeholders, have that kind of ability to provide not just the address, but these other kind of title references, or as a UPRN or things like that?
It's an interesting point. The ability to use that or record that information is available in the system. It's down to actually the agents deciding how they structure their references. I guess this is really down to we software is sort of giving them a tool to use it. People want flexibility to a degree in terms of tailoring it to their needs. So creating a reference with a UPRN, that actually is something that you can do in the system, but not all agents
Yes, exactly.
will do that. So I think that's it's down to what is considered, again, kind of best practice, as it were.
Indeed, indeed. And what would you highlight from your particular software approach to block management? Do you think is really going to help this process? Because obviously you've got a number of modules there. You're obviously already used to flowing information around. How are you kind of either adding to or kind of using your existing functionality to support the golden thread?
Yeah, let me. I'm just going to share a
Yeah,
slide
sure.
in relation to sort of one of the key areas of our software that actually kind of we feel sort of assists that. So hopefully you can
Yeah, I
see
can
that.
see
Everyone
that.
can see that. Yeah. So essentially, this is what we call our property portal, and as part of our software structure, I did mention it kind of in the opening dialogue around what we do. The ability to give people access to information when they want it, anytime of the day, anywhere, that kind of fits with this cloud-based approach. And really, the portal is that it's an interface where a leaseholder, let's say, can log in to their account and see information relates firstly just for their unit, which may be the financial side of things. So the service charges that are they are due to pay, the receipts that the payments they've made. And that is just obviously visible to them. From a GDPR perspective, you have to have the controls, checks and balances in on that. But actually, the other part of it is more around the communication. So the ability to communicate with the managing agent, with the property manager, with the credit controller, with potentially other stakeholders. That side of things is where I think, related to the golden thread, how some stakeholders could be able to utilize, or from our perspective, using our software, can utilize that. So things like documentation can be shared within, they can access it via the portal. They can be emailed it as well. They can be posted it. They can still, there's various ways to receive the information. That's another point to think about, is not everyone will want to go online and use technology. People will still want to get physical copies of things, and our software helps with integration around sending out physical copies of information. So I think that's something that again, it will help with giving information at the right time when people want it, not having to rely on having to speak to someone, but also able to communicate. So reporting an issue. So part of the portal actually enables a leaseholder to actually report a problem if it's to do with just their flat or the block. The property manager will get a notification straight away, and then they can respond back, and there's a dialogue that can then happen and be communicated using it. So it's just using technology to sort of improve that level of communication flow and the data that is shared and utilised.
Thanks, Dominic. I mean, you alluded to, I think earlier, to some potential kind of barriers, but what do you think is going to stop the marketplace fully implementing the golden thread? Whether that's availability of the data, technical issues, governance, behavioural, almost market incentives. What do you think are the barriers that we should be working with the market to overcome to make sure that actually some good comes out of this in terms of the terrible events of Grenfell, that we do end up with a good outcome in terms of the quality and the way that fire safety is handled?
Yes, and I guess this is one that there's a number of things that I feel could be a challenge. I mean, I sort of mentioned one there about people embracing technology. You can't. I mean, you can't just rely on technology. I mean, yes, people that are kind of growing up now, in the younger years, sort of growing up digital natives, if you will, they expect it, they're comfortable with it. But maybe older generations aren't. And I think you've got to have different forms of being able to provide information. So I think one of the barriers could be not having enough flexibility in terms of how information is accessed or shared, and having enough routes, so both having technology, physical forms, face-to-face meetings when we kind of get back to them, good old annual leaseholder meetings, of which I've attended a few. So I think it's that aspect is one that I think needs to be looked at. And culturally, that's kind of links into it. All stakeholders need to really get on board to make this work, because sadly, looking at Grenfell, there were a number of factors around how communication was made with the various stakeholders on the day, and I think that resulted in clearly a big tragedy. So I think that's one. So culture, and maybe the messaging around that, how that is promoted, is important, so that the managing agent, let's say looking after a block, actually takes steps to communicate with the various stakeholders, which in different forms. So that could be an online webinar, like a session like this. It could be a town hall meeting, where you go and actually meet people face to face. Sending out hard copy information as well. Phone calls. I think there's probably a holistic approach to sort of doing all of those things to just make sure everyone is communicated with effectively. So that's a key one, I guess. Another one which I guess knowing what the managing agent business is like, managing agents in particular operate on very slim margins. So who is going to pay for all of this this work, as it were, in terms of the extra data, the communication, the infrastructure that needs to go in place, and there will be a cost to it, clearly. And I think that leaseholders in particular, and I can empathise with this, I used to be a leaseholder myself, is that you pay this monthly charge, you think, well, what am I getting for my money? And and by the way, I'm having to pay this agent a cut of that to do what? And I think the agents get a bit of a hard time sometimes, because actually they are a conduit for interfacing with lots of different things and keeping everything sort of on track. So should actually people be prepared to say, actually, agents deserve a bigger slice to actually accommodate the additional cost? I think there's an argument there, but each agent will have their own sort of competitive value proposition that they'll pitch in that respect. So I think that financial impact is one potentially as well. And then I guess from a data perspective, just making sure, thinking about GDPR, thinking about the security of data, what is shared, is that got the right sort of checks and balances in place to make it secure and not causing any sort of vulnerabilities or breaches of personal data that could have an effect on individuals.
Yeah, on that last governance piece, I mean, it's interesting that obviously GDPR clearly is very focused on that concept of personal data. Do you see any kind of issues or hopefully opportunities to sort of look at where data is being shared that doesn't identify the individual, but clearly is very relevant for the block and for a particular unit, that perhaps isn't available enough to third parties, maybe, whether it's fire services or public authorities? Are we almost, dare I say it, using GDPR to almost block sharing, where actually the data concerned isn't private data, it's not personal, it's about a block where arguably for this particular use case, almost more information needs to be in the public domain than currently is? Is that an issue, do you think?
It's an interesting observation. I think GDPR now has been with us for 3 years, and obviously the lead up to it, people were running around working out, well, okay, is this secure? Have we got do we comply in the correct way? A lot of it, I hate to say, it's almost like it's a bit of common sense required. Clearly, if there is generic information that is relevant to a wider audience and you're not sharing anything confidential that relates to the individual per se, then I don't see the issue. I think you're right. We're probably sometimes a little bit too hesitant now because of the sort of the culture around not wanting to breach data protection laws. That could be a potential hindrance as well, because people don't sort of just take a more of a common sense approach. I think a lot of that will probably come out though, as we move down the track with the building safety bill. I think that some of that will be thought through and say, okay, look, what's a sensible approach here? You're not going to get sued for sharing building information that's generic, that sort of thing. So exactly. Hopefully common sense will prevail.
Indeed. And my last question, I'm just curious to know from your perspective, being very embedded in the market, what's the awareness of the golden thread within the managing agent community? Is there a danger that it's seen as an issue for construction companies and architects, and that actually is there a job for organizations like RICS and others to raise awareness of the golden thread from a kind of property management perspective?
I think in the last point, I think absolutely. I think organisations like RICS, are clearly pivotal. I think in terms of helping, being as a thought leader, trusted advisor status. People look to the RICS for information to trust and be relevant. And I think in answering the first part of the question about what are we seeing with the agents that use our system, I think it's a bit hit and miss. I think some agents are aware of it and are actively engaged and very are watching the progress of what's happening with the Fire Safety Act that's just come through, and now the Building Safety. I think they're very engaged with it. But there's others that, and dare I say it, the smaller agents. 1 or 2 man or person band, with just a few blocks. It's maybe a tag-on business that they're not as focused because, frankly, they've got a lot on their plate and it's not top of their agenda. So I think, as long as there is, I get good information flow, organisations like RICS making that available, people like ourselves, helping to educate and provide data, it will trickle through. And I think which is kind of the nature with lots of business. If you've got big organisations, that's all they do.
Yes,
they'll tend to have people in departments dealing with it, worrying about it, and the smaller ones will sort of pick up the information a bit later. So I think it's incumbent to all of us sort of in sort of leadership positions to sort of make people aware.
Exactly. Well, that's been tremendous, and I've really enjoyed our conversation today. It really just falls to me to say thanks very much, Dominic, and I look forward to talking again. I think you and I are going to talk about the more general kind of application of technology and hybrid ways of working, and how actually technology should be an enabler for businesses. And I think it's been interesting, as we've discussed today, that so much of this still comes back to people. We can talk about the data and tech, but ultimately it needs to be adopted by people, and people need to work out how they use it as a tool, as a communication tool, almost in an omni-channel way, to use the phrase from retail, whereas you said yourself, some people still want bits of paper. So it's really about how people and technology interact, which is the real power. So once again, many thanks. Been a great talk, and I look forward to chatting again soon, Dominic.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, thanks so much for your time, Andrew. Appreciate that, and it's been been very enjoyable to do part of the discussion.
Great. Talk to you soon again.
Cheers,